Hey everyone, and welcome to the GamesIndustry.biz podcast. My name's Will Freeman. I'm a game journalist, a freelance contributor to GI for many years now, and your host for this special edition of the show. Today we're going to tuck into the fascinating realm of co-development, looking at how it can help your project or your team, the disciplines it can complement and serve, how to get a co-development partnership right, and importantly, how it's distinct from outsourcing. And spoiler alert there, it really is quite distinct from outsourcing. I was really lucky for today's conversation to be joined by a panel of amazing experts. We've got Morgan Jaffit of Wētā Workshop, James Chan from RocketRide Games, and Ryan Thornton from Codev providers Virtuos. Just so much to learn from today's conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's dive in.
Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're here, of course, to discuss co-development and what that can do for game studios. Game studios of all kinds, really. We're going to talk about particularly mid-sized studios, those kind of ambitious mid-sized studios that are really defining a lot of the success and growth and kind of commercial and creative successes across the games industry right now. This should be a really valid listen, whatever kind of studio at, whatever kind of development or managerial role, even if you're in worlds like publishing, because co-development sincerely is something of a profound movement or sea change in the industry. It's been around a long time, of course, but we're really seeing a kind of change in the dynamic and how it can help games. So with that done, I'd love to introduce our brilliant guests. In fact, people are going to hear a lot of my voice, so I'll get you guys to do it yourself. We'll start with you, James. It'd be great to hear kind of what you do in the games industry and perhaps what led you there.
Sure. Hi, my name is James Chan. I'm the current VP of Technology and GM of Asia for RocketRide Games. We're an agency and consultancy. Right now, I do a lot of BD. I help people find publishing deals, and then I help work for hire studios actually find Codev and introduce publishers to people, basically. I started my career, 25 years ago as a software engineer. I worked at studios at WayForward, Telltale, and Yacht Club. I started really, really young. My first computer was an 8088. I was 6 years old. I was playing Moonbugs and Dig Dug on it. But my current favorites are very retro 90s titles, Gunstar Heroes, Chrono Trigger, Colonization, weirdly enough. That's my favorite of the series.
You're talking squarely about my era of gaming there, James, so I'm going to resist getting nostalgic. Ryan, it'd be great to hear the same from yourself.
So I'm Ryan, the design director of the Shanghai studio we're here, and so I work with various teams on the design aspect of all the projects we're working on. Right? So, we handle console, PC, all kinds of stuff. I kind of started into games as well quite young. I think my first game that I really kind of fell in love with was Pole Position on the Commodore 64. And then, Gianna Sisters and things like this, and then further on through Super Nintendo and other systems. I always felt like I had a passion for games and had an affinity for art and just kind of it was interested in computers, so I thought that was just kind of the perfect match to kind of get me into the game industry.
I feel we've all got a second career with us doing a retro gaming podcast, but again, I will resist that. Morgan, it would be great to hear about your career and time with games.
So most recently I've been working as the executive producer for Wētā Workshop in New Zealand, helping build out their games team and the title Tales of the Shire, which they're working on, which will be out soon. Prior to that, I spent about a decade founding and building Defiant Development, who made Hand of Fate and several other titles. And prior to that, I was at Pandemic Australia, then EA, Ubisoft, Behaviour in Canada, Irrational Games, and Relic Entertainment. So I've, like James, I've been doing it for about a quarter of a century now, and right now I'm in semi-retirement and working on a book. So that's the
right.
That's what I'm up to as of today.
I can't work out if you're succeeding or failing at semi-retirement by joining us on a podcast in your evening.
It is. It's always fun to keep in touch, and it is a book about and around the games industry. So it's always useful to keep chatting to people.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm delighted you've come out of semi-retirement for us, Morgan. So yeah, thank you so much for that. It's really great to hear. Kind of, yeah, I think we all share that you know, our professional positions spawn from a love and knowledge of the medium, which is a great foundation for this conversation. I guess first of all, let's talk about those. When I think of mid-sized teams, I think some of the most successful games we have around are some made by mid-sized teams, and yet there are many mid-sized teams that would perhaps like to be more ambitious, have more growth. Yeah, I guess just to get to the question, what do you feel is stopping mid-sized teams and even these ambitious mid-sized teams grow more? I don't know. All these questions are open to anyone.
I'll jump in. I have strong opinions.
Great, that's what we want.
About everything, really. The biggest challenge that mid-sized teams have at the moment is a lot of them have grown from I would say, the very fertile indie environment that we've had over the last decade that's possibly got a little rockier in the more recent years, but they are coming at the question of how to be a mid-sized developer for the first time. And I lived through the era where a bunch of studios were becoming mid-sized studios for the first time, and nobody had really done it before, and they didn't really have a good idea of how to do it. Now, actually, there's quite a few people who've done it before. There is experience out there. You don't have to make all of the same problems from the ground up moving on. And I think working out ways to draw on that experience, ways to utilize the expertise that exists so that you don't have to make all of the same mistakes that I made, that the studios I worked at made 20 years ago. You want to make a whole bunch of new and interesting mistakes, and that's really the opportunity at the moment.
Yeah, and that idea of inheriting expertise makes me want to thunder forward into talking more about co-development. But before we do, Ryan, some nodding there. Is that something you've seen in terms of the struggle of those mid-sized teams? And perhaps we can start to talk about potential solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree on those points. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of challenges and just kind of like scaling up, right? Making sure that you have the right size team, like the right kind of in-house team that has like cross-platform development experience, and then just dealing with kind of managing larger teams is also a bigger challenge.
Fantastic. And I guess we can start to touch on why co-development is kind of such a perfect solution. How does co-development meet some of the challenges we've just kind of described?
So I think like part of it, right, is being able to have like the efficiency, like the time to market, to be able to get to market quickly and fast, to keep the costs low and keep it the risk management low. So I think that's part of it. And getting, with co-development, you're going to get access to a large range of experience, right? So you get people that are specialists in different areas that can further fortify the team.
And I guess, it's always a slightly naff start to something like a podcast or an article to talk about defining the subject matter we're going to talk about. But I think it would be quite helpful, especially some people might be thinking of outsourcing. And from what I understand, there can be some overlap, some grey area. But how can we frame what Codev is? There is me asking the defined Codev question, but what Codev is, particularly separating it from things like outsourcing.
So I'd say like if you're looking for a Codev partner, you're looking for somebody that can kind of take on a portion of your game, right? So you can kind of offload some of those concerns you have. Yeah.
But I guess how would that differ, say, from when I think of outsourcing? I think of perhaps using a company, a studio, to develop certain assets for you and deliver exactly what you need. Would it be fair to say co-development's more of in you guys' experience, is co-development more of a collaboration than a provision of service? I think like if you look at outsourcing, it's more like kind of an extra hands approach, right? Where you need to have people to create a specific section of stuff. Whereas like and then that can kind of become a bit like fragmented when you're trying to manage all of these different outsourcing vendors, right? So like a Codev partner would be able to handle something that includes all disciplines and their entirety. And so we've talked about kind of those mid-sized studios. They can be thriving, but you want to pursue more growth, want to pursue more impact through their games. it'd be interesting to hear about how you even identify when Codev might be the solution. I guess, I'm thinking in a very casual way, you could say, well, any studio could do with a bit of help. How might a studio, when you've become involved in code development, how have you gone about identifying the need or identifying that is the right solution?
I mean, there's a thing I'll touch on here, which is I work with a lot of studios. I do a lot of mentoring. And whenever I'm working with a small to a mid-sized team, the only thing I'm interested in is what they do better than anybody else. Like, where is their magic? What is it that they excel at? And that's the start of any relationship I have. And always when you look at a team, you'll go, oh, okay, so there are some things you do great. And then there are some things that are not in your wheelhouse, that are hard to hire for, that don't exist in the building. Growing the team capacity to be able to do all those things is really difficult, particularly when you're midstream on a project and you need to keep thundering forward. That's the perfect time to look around and work out which of these things can you avoid doing, because that's, that one key is always to try not to do the things that you don't do exceptionally, and the other is to find people who can help. And that's the great advantage of a Codev partner. For an outsource partner, you really have to be managing that process as well as you would do internally. So, but to be able to bring in external skills and bring in expertise, either internally from an organization or externally, that's kind of the benefit and the challenge.
Yeah, and I like that, right? It's about looking at your strengths as a studio. I like the idea of thinking it in that way, not considering what can't we do, but what do we do well, and then what complements that. That sounds like a strategic... I like it. I like the feel of it, but it sounds like a strategic approach is to almost identify the strengths of a studio, right?
Yeah, there's a real truism, I think, which is that every Fortune 500 big publicly traded company constitutionally looks similar. They have vice presidents, they have an organizational structure, they have reporting. All big companies eventually end up with an organizational similarity. All small companies are idiosyncratic and different, and mid-sized companies are somewhere on that journey from whatever strange birthing that they had towards being more organized and more disciplined and more structured. And that for me is where the joy is. And as I say, that's why, you look at those and you go, well, you got here somehow. There's something that you do really well. Let's make sure you get to do more of that without getting too bogged down in the things that aren't in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. What have you all learned about the best ways to embrace code development and maximise its potential? I guess obviously different projects, different needs, code development by its very definition can change shape to couple with different needs. But in general, what is the best mindset through which to embrace Codev? I guess I'm here thinking about things like, I might put this to you first of all, James. What have you learnt about getting it right? Maybe it being more of a partnership than just thinking it a cold provision of service.
I always thought about the minute you think Codev versus outsourcing, it's more like working together with a different division of the same company, of the same project versus a black box, right? Outsource, I literally want hi, I have these 500 things I need. I'm going to throw it across the fence and I'm going to wait for those 500 things to come back. But Codev, it's okay, we're all going to agree these are the communication tools that we're going to use. Everybody goes on the same Slack or the same Discord. We're all going to agree this is our project management, and it's going to be, a discussion between producers on both the hiring side and the Codev side, right? It's hey, these are the things that we use. What do you usually use? And they go, okay, we're pretty similar management structure wise. We're going to do that. And, we're going to use the same tools, give each other the same visibility into both teams. I want to say that the best Codev is when everybody on the team knows everybody on the other team's name versus just artist 5 and you don't know who that is. That's when you get to the good part.
And I guess of course there's a time and a place for outsourcing, right? Nothing wrong with outsourcing, but I love that idea, like knowing the names of the teams, right? I guess at the same time, I think, wow, there's a complexity to bringing companies together. Both as James was talking, Morgan and Ryan, you were both nodding enthusiastically. I just wonder what you've learnt about how you can actually bring those teams together, right? Like, this is a wonderful opportunity we're talking about. I love the thing, connecting, kind of almost being collaborators, knowing each other by names. How can a studio approach that kind of coupling with a Codev?
Well, I think like naturally, if you see most Codev outfits, they've worked with multiple projects before. They're normally quite flexible on that sort of stuff. So like certainly like coming to an agreement on the communications channels, like what was mentioned before, and like what is the vision of your game and that sort of stuff. Like just getting really closely aligned on that stuff, and then making sure that your pipelines kind of match up. Is a big start.
To add to that, I think when I'm working with a team, the thing I'm most concerned about is trust and alignment. So you want to get everybody on the same page. You want to build trust. There are processes and structures that can help to build trust and build alignment. And that's a big part of what I get involved with teams to help formalize and build structures on. And then that makes it easy for that to go, outside the building into your partnerships and the teams you work with. And the other thing about it for me is that there's a really common conversation that I have with teams who say, oh gosh, I'm not ready. I don't have everything organized and all my T's dotted and everything sort of lined up that I could work with an external partner because I haven't got it all worked out yet. And the thing that teams tend not to understand is that when you're working with a Codev partner, as people are saying, that they've done it with dozens of other teams, hundreds of teams. They're experts in being helpful. And actually, you don't need to solve everything before you have the conversation. Starting the conversation knowing you've got a lot to solve is really a big part of the game.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to remember, is if it could be intimidating, that I described it as kind of coupling a studio and a Codev. Like you say, Codevs aren't just experts in co-development. That coupling is something, I presume, they can bring that as well, right? Moving on a little bit, I just wanted to talk about some of the hiring challenges mid-sized studios face today, particularly for technical roles. Let's just kind of get the fundamentals out of the way. Do we see hiring to digress a little bit, as I'm prone to, I guess you could hire your way to having a bigger team, right? And accept hiring can bring challenges. What challenges do we see out there in terms of hiring?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to hire and kind of maintain like a large engineering in-house team, right? And then you've got like industry surveys like from like New Zealand, which shows like the game programmers are the most in demand for the market last year. You've got game programmers got paid the most and ranked the most challenging positions to hire in game studios in Malaysia from the NDEC report. So, and so that's where maybe a Codev can kind of come in and help you provide where you might be having some gaps.
Yeah, I guess either. Yeah, and to James or Morgan, how have you seen perhaps Codev face off that hiring challenge?
Hiring takes time. And it takes time from your key people. So it all comes down to what stage of the project you're in. But when things are really underway, absolute best case, hiring end to end might take 6 months to start landing the people in the studio up and being up to speed and productive inside your structures. That's really tricky. And it's really tricky when you're doing it at scale. I also tend not to recommend that teams scale more than 10% in a year because it's just a lot of overhead. So if you're in the process of gradual growth, great. Hiring is how you build on your key strengths, build the internal studio strength, build your expertise. If you're looking at scaling questions, hiring is a tough nut to crack while scaling. It's a classic... the classic analogy of throwing all the pieces of an aircraft off the side of a cliff and then trying to assemble it on the way down. You don't want to add any difficulty to that, right? So,
Yeah. And I think we have things like, particularly in the live ops maintained era, right? You might suddenly have more success on your hands after launch and stuff. And I guess that's another area we might see co-development kind of provide healthy, sustainable, rapid growth compared to going on a ill-advised hiring frenzy.
When I started at WayForward, I think I was employee 16. It took a good 8 years for us to get to 100 to 120 people. Like I think that's like okay growth. When I was at Telltale, we went from 200 to 400 in less than 18 months, and that is insane. I remember 10 people would show up for orientation every week or something like that. So I was head of the IT team at the same time. So we were just deploying computers and desks just nonstop, all while trying to build like a Active Directory environment all at the same time. Because when you're 50 people, you don't have these kinds of things, to scale. I figured that's how I would build future companies, and Yacht Club and BYG are actually set up to grow up to 200. Like the tech stack actually can do it, but I would never recommend adding people that fast. But what's like talent is hard to find. It doesn't matter whether it's an engineer, it's artist, designer, whatever. Like talent is hard to find. The person that is and I'm not just talking about like hard skills, right? The correct person in your studio will have a combination of hard and soft skills. And in games, I think it's even more difficult, is because I feel like a lot of game people need to constantly update themselves and play modern games and have that same sort of DNA, so that when I'm talking to you about a game and we're talking about a design, I can reference something that came out 2 months ago and you're like, I played it. I love that feature. Right. It's like, so it's just hard to scale. It's not just engineering, it's everyone.
I think that's one of the most wonderful challenges of our industry's growth, is staying informed as the medium gets bigger and broader. It takes some keeping up. I love that I have to do it. But, you talking about your tech stack and the staff capacity, so to speak, that to go up to. When I think of Codev, I can be guilty of thinking of design and art and production stuff, but kind of the game making skills. But at the same time, how can Codev help in terms of developing pipelines and tech stacks and technological capacity? Is that something within the scope of co-development?
I remember working with Virtuos on a previous project, and the original team was a lot smaller than Virtuos, and they hadn't dealt with problems of like 80 people, 100-man scale, and even something as simple as how to basically get everyone at the studio on the same Unreal Engine version for 80 people, trying to have to distribute that. For small studios, that's not really a problem that they deal with. But when you have enough engineers and you have enough velocity where there's enough change, you need to be able to push those engine binaries out very, very quickly. And that's not usually a skill in the DevOps side that a growing studio has encountered. But someone like Virtuos, it's like, oh yeah, we did that like 6 projects ago. Here's the entire thing you need to support it, and let's go.
So it sounds like it's very possible to kind of leverage Codev to address those complex production challenges and infrastructure needs.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Virtuos has worked on a variety of different projects and things like this. So naturally we're going to have some different strengths between studios, and then being able to just kind of collaborate back and forth, share the knowledge, and build up these new pipelines is really helpful.
Fantastic. I guess another area, if we're thinking again, it's very easy to think of when you think of someone doing Codev, I think of someone sitting at the desk designing, creating a game on a computer, which of course is a key part of it. But what about entities such as project management? I almost think of back at the beginning of our conversation about mid-sized studios maybe started out as indies, and they've grown creatively and in terms of ability, but having project management structures and skills and that kind of thing. How how can Codev contribute to things like project management? Are managerial roles in the production process best kept in-house, perhaps?
The way I look at all of this is effectively any time you can look around the room and ask the question, has anybody in the room solved this problem before? If the answer to that is yes, then that's a +10 buff to whatever you're doing, right? Like, and that's the situation. I was talking earlier about how mid-sized teams tend to be a lot more idiosyncratic, right? If you ask that question, has anybody in the room done this before? There will be 10 questions for which the answer is yes, and hopefully that team is steering in that direction. But there's always going to be 5 questions to which the answer is no. And if they're weak in project management at scale, then that's a great place to be talking to your partners. If they're weak on their tech stack, then that's a great place to be talking to your partners. It's just so much of an opportunity to not solve problems for the first time, except for the really, really, really important ones to what you're making, the unique problems that you have, as like interesting problems as opposed to common everyday problems.
Yeah, I guess that's another nice kind of positive way of thinking about it is you can also keep some of the stuff you have the right skill set for or enjoy tackling, right? And Ryan, again, you were slightly guilty of nodding along there. What have you, from your side, what have you learned about getting that right when it comes to using Codev for project management and managerial stuff?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think if you harking back to like, what are some of the areas that you're strongest at versus some of the areas that you feel like, okay, this is somewhere where I need to seek out a Codev partner, right? And just think about, okay, so what are some of the parts that you think that they can own for you? Try and make sure that they take care of like the day to day, all of the other kind of management tasks, right? Just getting that part of that product ready and done, while still keeping in communication and making sure we have a close collaboration, right?
And James, I'd love to hear your experience here.
Some people would call me crazy, but on a past project, I actually told the Codev producer that he says, "Hey, you're more senior than all the producers inside the studio that it's actually like the main studio. I want you as the senior producer for the entire project. You're teaching all the internal people how to run this project." And they were like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, do it." Right. So then that became like a really, really, a really great experience. I've also done a lot of time shifting in like early Telltale. I think we actually worked with Virtuos Sparks, right? And we were in San Francisco. They were in Vietnam, and I would say like when you do that kind of time shifting, the production team actually is just basically one team, right? They're not the outside producer. They're literally just like the producer that's time shifted on the other side. So you need to enable that side PM, the time shifted one, right, to be able to unblock things, make calls. You have to give them enough just say like marching orders. You're like, hey, if this breaks, keep going, because I trust you to make enough decisions on the fly that won't affect this project. Because a work stoppage on like a remote side that's 8 hours away is gonna cost way more money than anything. So that producer has got to go, yep, I'm gonna make the decision, we're gonna move past it. And so you're just all the same team, like production team, same team. You're not split between inside and outside. You're just this one production team.
Yeah, I love that mindset is so powerful in this context. To pivot a bit, we're still going to be talking about Codev, but to pivot a bit to obviously a huge part of games success, especially as we kind of see shifts around what platforms are and games as platforms and all these kind of movements, is cross-platform strategies. Why should mid-sized teams consider a cross-platform strategy, or when they're looking at distribution and development to a new platform, what should you be mindful of in terms of the skills and resources needed? And I guess inevitably, how can Codev help?
If you're talking about that, then you've got sim ship or staggered ship kind of scenarios, right? Where You can have, say, for example, like the main studio taking care of kind of the main SKU or the main part, while you have your other Codev studios working at the same time to get you ready for all of these other platforms, right? So then you basically have this parallel thread going together, which will give you a faster ship to market, right?
And James or Morgan, I just wondered if if you've had what you've learnt seeing kind of how Codev can help with cross-platform and why we should even be pursuing cross-platform as mid-sized studios.
Yeah, there are big benefits to SimShip across multiple platforms. The platforms of choice shift over time. Obviously, we've got Switch 2 coming up now. There are different platform partnerships that align. And if you only ship, I mean, this is the truth, right? Like, if you only ship one game every 3, 4, 5 years, 2 games maybe every 3, 4, 5 years, you're not dealing with the day-to-day issues of console release, of platform release, and they're a massive pain in the butt. So it's really nice to deal with people who are dealing with TCRs, TRCs day in, day out, and can help let you focus on the game and the game release. But there are huge benefits to SimShip, and if you're working with an external publisher, they will almost certainly want you to do SimShip. They will almost certainly have platform relationships in place that they're encouraging you to drive towards. And if you don't have that capacity in-house, you're hosed. So
I'm going to agree with Morgan here. And the greatest part about having the Codev team in early, even if it's only a small team before you're scaling up, is if they've shipped on all these things before, they can actually cut a lot of the porting time down, because they can look at what you're building and your very, very creatively cool, idiosyncratic team can focus on the creative stuff. And then you have people around you going, that's not going to work on console. That's a TRC violation. That will not pass. You need to rethink this design. You need to do all these kinds of things. So, you can sort of steer it, versus they're like, we're good. We're done. The game is done. We're going to ship it on PC. And then, now we're going to talk to people to port it. And they go, we can't. This doesn't work for console at all. We'll have to redesign giant portions of your game, versus going like, bringing them early, talking and going, this is how I would design it to be happy for console. Even something as simple as where UI elements are on the screen, right? It's like nobody remembers a long time ago, like because of CRTs, you actually have to pull in UI elements a bit from the corner. And a new PC studio that's never done that will never ever think about it. But you go, oh no, actually for console, you need to like pull that in a little bit still, because underscan, overscan, I don't know. It's, I can't remember if it's still in the latest TRC, but it might be there.
Mentioning CRTs, you're starting to lure us back to being the retro gaming podcast we're trying not to be, James. I guess, when I think of, we're going to move on to challenges. We've been kind of talking about, rightly so, the strengths and merits of Codev. When I think of just the very principle of, even in the simplest way you can, making a game is effectively tussling with challenge and kind of the pleasure of overcoming with solutions, right? So there's nothing wrong with challenges here, but just for studios embracing Codev for the first time, or thinking about embracing Codev for the first time, are there particular challenges they should be aware of, and how can they prepare for them? I guess to put that more simply, what are the challenges of connecting yourself with your Codev partner and making sure they bring you what you need?
Takes time. Takes effort, takes resources on your side. Doesn't take having the problem solved before you start. And I guess that's the big thing I would kind of draw the line under, right? Like you can solve the problems together. You don't actually have to get them all solved before you begin, but you have to be prepared to invest in that process to get the benefit, right? It's all there's a leveraged return on all the effort that you spend, and it's worth spending. But it doesn't come. You can't just be like, hey, solve all my problems. Here's the code base. Bye. And expect that to lead to a great result. So.
Right. But I guess we're talking about putting in that effort early. Obviously, the gains, right? It's putting in it's I guess it's almost an investment, right? An investment of effort to gain more. Ryan, it'd be great to hear sort of almost from the other side, your perspectives there.
Yeah, so I'd say like my piece of advice for these studios would be to like align on the expectations as early as possible, right? Try and figure out what is the vision, what are some of the processes and things you want to go through. Like one of the things that we set up is we'll set up kind of a phase gate process with our client. We'll have, okay, these are the different phases of development. If you guys agree, is this kind of the thing that we want to hit on for these different deliverables? But just making sure, like, for example, quality benchmark, or, what are we aiming for, all of that sort of stuff. Just try and figure out some of this stuff early stages, and then it's all the better when you're kind of developing together and solving these problems as you go.
Fantastic, really helpful. James, have you, what have you learnt about kind of the challenges, or perhaps you've only ever got it perfectly right? No, but it'd just be interesting to hear about, or any advice you have for kind of circumnavigating that kind of founding challenge of the setup.
Think about how I always say, like, the greatest thing about working with the Codev is that when you're onboarding new people internally, you got to onboard them, you train them one at a time, and you do it. When you're working with the Codev and you have a senior engineer on the other end, leverage him, is because you teach him and he's going to teach all his juniors, and that's why they're really there. That's where he's going to be the most helpful. And then documentation, oh dear Lord, like that's the one that you gotta, like, you're like, our team is great is because we've passed by oral history our project, and this is how you do everything. And then when you bring a new person in, they're like, oh, you mean I can't like be here to answer your questions? So like, start documenting. That's the thing that you would want to do the most. It's like that.
Yeah, profoundly helpful stuff.
Yeah. Just another one that occurred to me is I think sometimes there might be the impression that you need to be like super hands-on with your Codev team and that sort of thing. And I think, like, again, going back to the trust and all that sort of stuff, I think that's your Codev partner will have been working with various other studios before. This is nothing new, and we have the processes to be able to kind of facilitate. Yeah.
The one thing I would add to that is, like, the greatest thing about work for hire teams and Codev teams in general is the amount of code that we've seen from all sorts of different partners. We wouldn't survive if we weren't quick to try and grok and understand everything that's going on, and that's actually why we survive. So we're usually pretty fast at it.
Brilliant. Honestly, all those insights will be so helpful to listeners. So really great stuff. I wanted to talk about, finding the right fit when there's things like, I guess there's the practical considerations, the co-development providers, experience and specialties and tech stack and those kind of things. And then there's that thing of cultural fit. And obviously studio culture, the authenticity of culture is so important to so many studios. Is that an important factor? How do you find how much should a studio consider those kind of factors when kind of forging or founding a Codev relationship? I almost think of that thing, I think it was James mentioned earlier, of knowing everyone's names on the teams, right? That seemed to be where we are. But yeah, is that an important consideration?
I mean, you're going to make a game together, and that's a really important 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your life, right?
Right. Yeah.
I tend to measure all of these things in terms of the value of doing this with my time and the value of doing this together with the people that I'm doing it with, and that extends inside the studio, outside the studio, to all of our partners. And I think it's incredibly important. Working out how you're going to build that working relationship and going on that journey together is key, right? It's not just about, I mean, it's sort of like asking somebody to come in and help contribute on creating your baby. So it is important that you like the DNA they bring, I guess. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess another skill of Codev is being a bit of a cultural chameleon in terms of being able to fit. Yeah, I'll just quickly put that to you Ryan. Kind of, again, coming from that other side, what you've learnt about how important the cultural fit is and kind of making that work.
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the cultural fit's super important, but, and I think that's, where, say, for example, Virtuos is helpful because they can, we've got studios all over the world, right? So you've got your options of what's kind of the best team you want to work with. But, like what's been said is that, you want to make sure that you're working with some people that see the vision for your game that you can work with for the next 5 years or more.
And as we draw close to the end of today's conversation, I guess something it would be good to hear a little bit more about is that thing about accelerating growth through Codev. So, how can a studio embrace Codev in a way that can really accelerate growth? What is it that drives? How is it that Codev drives growth?
You can always scale faster with partners, right? That's the truth. We were talking about the difficulties of growing and the potential cultural issues, the fact that it takes you key people out. If you want to double in size in 12 months, you risk blowing everything up. But working with established partners lets you grasp opportunities as they arise.
Fantastic. It would just be great from each of you to get one final tip or piece of advice on making the most of Codev opportunity. We can tuck into something we've already discussed or something new, but yeah, one kind of from your own experience, one piece of advice, and I'm going to pick you first, James.
I would say don't bring on co-dev teams to dictate what they're going to do. You'll find it very tiresome and a very terrible relationship. Give them ownership, present them problems, have them propose solutions, ask the right questions, and then plan, document, and execute. And then just keep the communication going.
Fantastic. I wish I could have been as eloquent in that in some of my sentences. Ryan.
A whole lot of my points. It's a good one. I think that I totally agree, and I think that just be open-minded. Don't worry about you'll have teams from various competencies around different parts of the world, but it has its advantages as well, right? It's kind of good sometimes you'll be able to work on something during the day, and then all of a sudden, another part of the world is working with a Codev team. Boom, you get it there in the morning. It's just kind of 24-hour development.
Right, yeah, which obviously tremendous gains, right? It's almost a time travel gain. Morgan, one last piece of advice on Codev.
Yeah, I think James summarised it really well, and I would just add from the developer side, it's really important to hold a beginner's mind and be happy to know what you know and learn what you don't know. I find that that's always the most enriching relationship anyway. So it's beneficial. But yeah, go in with a clear idea of where you need help, but ready to be surprised by the things that can be built together.
Brilliant. And I love, Codev is obviously about creative and commercial success and growth and all these opportunities, but I love the kind of soft skill that seems to found the opportunity is collaboration, enthusiasm for sharing your skill sets, enthusiasm for and respect for the craft of others and bringing that together. I'm always reminded when someone said to me soft skills are strong skills, so they should be called tough skills, not soft skills, and I like that version of it. But that's really nice that we're talking about creative collaboration and all the opportunities that can bring. On that note, I'll just say thank you so much for joining me. All of your insights were, fantastic, really helpful. Thanks to all our listeners for joining us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation. Honestly, I learned so much from that, and I really hope you did too. Thanks so much for listening, and of course thanks so much to our panel of experts, Morgan Jaffit from Wētā Workshop, James Chan from RocketRide Games, and Ryan Thornton from Virtuos. Yeah, a really great one. See you next time. Goodbye.